Earlier this morning, we talked to Gloria Allred, who was the attorney for the Brown family all through the O.J. Simpson trial. It is, of course, the 25th anniversary of the murders of Ron and Nicole. Coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to talk to a woman by the name of Linda Deutsch, who is a longtime crime reporter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she was it. She worked at Associated Press for many, many years, right? And covered many trials. She was in the newsroom during the Manson murders. I don't want to say trials. When the news broke, she was covering. I want to talk to her about that, but we're definitely going to talk to her about OJ.
Well, she just got an exclusive one-on-one interview with OJ Simpson.
She did.
About the 25th anniversary of those murders. She went to Las Vegas. She talked to him. He told her all about his new life in the state of Nevada, how people treat him, what he expects to happen in the future, who he talks to, what he thinks about everything. It was a fascinating interview. She's going to be here to tell us just exactly what it was like.
That's right. Very interesting. I can't wait to talk to her about her message to Leslie Van Houten lately. She has been on the sympathetic side to the Manson murderer. She killed Rosemary LaBianca, or helped to kill Rosemary. And, Linda has been very sympathetic towards Leslie. So we'll talk to her a little bit about that.
And she's retired as a crime reporter, but she came out of retirement to do this O.J. Simpson piece.
She did. She absolutely did.
It's 9:07, Talk Radio 790 KABC. As we mentioned before, it is the 25th anniversary of the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. It doesn't seem like it was 25 years ago, but it was.
There's a whole generation that has been born, the millennials that are now 24, 25, that have, I'm sure they've heard of OJ, but they don't have a clue.
Well, Steve and I had this conversation last week.
Yeah.
Trump totally dominates the news cycle in a way that we haven't seen dominated since OJ. When OJ was going on, when you would turn the news on or you would get a newspaper, it was OJ, 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 OJ.
That was my life I don't know, as long as it was. That's all we did. I would get to Good Day LA and we would start the coverage. I would be listening on the way in and then it would just start. And for 3 hours during breaks, we would do analysis. We would have, all of the dismissed jurors would come on the show. We had Johnny Cochran. We had everybody. Shapiro. I got to know Kardashian. It was everyone involved came on. And then Darden and Clark did at the very end when they lost. They came on.
That trial
very sad.
Made any number of careers, and not just for the attorneys and the judge and people involved in the actual trial.
Made and broke and ruined careers, I think.
That's true.
I don't think Chris Darden did a lot after that.
Well, he's in private practice now, I think.
He was hated by the black community, and, the whole thing was horrible.
Isn't he involved in the Nipsey Hussle thing now?
I don't know if he's still. I thought he removed himself.
I think he's defending the guy that they think may have killed Nipsey Hussle.
Thought he removed himself from that, but you could be right.
Oh, did he? I knew that his daughter was getting all kinds of hell online over it.
It's horrible.
But
she have to do with anything? It's so silly.
A lot of the people involved in the trial are now dead, including Johnny Cochran.
And Shapiro, Kardashian.
Kardashian's dead. Judita Brown is dead. But many of them are still alive.
Effley Bailey, Barry Scheck.
That's right. Effley Bailey, by the way, just lit everyone up in an interview where he said that Bob Shapiro couldn't cross-examine a plastic bag.
That's not cool.
He went off on Alan Dershowitz.
Dershowitz is not only still around, he's very public. He talks about Trump constantly.
That's right. And Jeffrey Toobin. It's amazing how so many of the OJ people are now Trump commentators on TV.
Yeah, they really are.
Well, OJ Simpson just gave an interview to the Associated Press. And I believe it's the only one he's given about the 25-year anniversary. The reporter he talked to is a longtime true crime reporter who is retired,
very
came
well
out
known.
of retirement to do this interview with OJ. She is kind enough to join us this morning. Linda Deutsch, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Linda, and welcome to the show. We're good. You know, we were saying 25 years. You have covered crime for a lot longer than that. And I'm really curious as to, because you are a prominent voice in crime coverage and true crime. You're always there. You have pen and paper in hand and ready. Where were you when you heard the news of O.J. Simpson being a suspect and the car chase and all of that?
It was weird. I was on vacation. I was back in New York. And I called my office because I turned on the TV and there was every lawyer that I knew was having press conference. And here was the most famous football player ever suddenly charged with, as a suspect. And I called my office in Los Angeles and I said, "Do you want me to come home?" Because I was on vacation. And my editor said, well, he said he thought for a second. He said, if he is actually charged in this, you're going to be covering it for a very long time. So why don't you just finish your vacation? And I did, and it was the last vacation I had for a long time.
I bet. And what stood out to you? Because for us watching, I mean, just seeing this, the chase, I remember thinking, well, come on, what innocent guy got a disguise and $15,000 in cash? I mean, what's he doing? And to see it unfold, was it crazier than any crimes that you'd seen outside of perhaps Manson? Because I know that you were a young reporter then. Was it the craziest thing that you'd ever seen as a crime reporter?
Oh, since Manson, yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
It became a national obsession. I mean, people were tuned into that. When the trial began, it was gavel to gavel on TV. And I remember I met a guy in Hawaii who told me that he changed his entire work schedule so he could get up in the middle of the night there and watch the case live.
Yeah.
Everybody was, it was the talk of every dinner party in Beverly Hills.
It was on every screen when you would walk by a local store. If they had a TV, it was on it, on the radio nonstop. It just was everywhere. We were bombarded and transfixed, because he was a celebrity. He was known. It wasn't a random thing. Here's a guy that we watched in movies and on the field.
Right.
It had every element.
I've often said that, he was the most famous American ever charged with murder. And that, people say, oh, it was a big story because it was on TV. No, that would have been a big story whether it was TV or not.
It was on TV because he was a big, huge star in America.
And you mentioned the millennials, which is a good point because I was interviewed the other day by a young woman who was a toddler when this happened.
Oh, my God.
And she basically said to me, why was this such a big deal?
Oh, my gosh. Wow. How do you even begin to explain, educate, and respond to that?
You can't.
Yeah, it's history, and that's why I was really thrilled that he was willing to talk to me because we've talked many times over the years. I've been kind of his go-to reporter for comments on anything. And I felt like this was necessary to kind of bring a coda to the story. He got out of prison. He's been living in Las Vegas, and it's as if people just thought, oh, well, he got out of prison and that's the end of it. We'll never hear from him again. But no, this is an important chapter because we at least catch up.
Now, did you speak to him in person or over the telephone?
Over the telephone.
And you also spoke with, which I'm very grateful to, Kim Goldman, victims, and I know that the Lou and Judita's family the Brown family didn't respond to you, Tanya and Denise.
Right.
But
I did not talk to Kim. A colleague of mine, John Rogers, talked to her.
Okay.
Could you describe to us what your conversation was like with OJ?
Well, he's a very easy person to talk to. He's very talkative and very articulate, and he basically started out by saying he wasn't going to say anything and didn't want me to write anything, but by the end of the conversation, he changed his mind slightly. I mean, he never did talk about anything to do with the crimes. He said that he doesn't want to go back over that. His family is living what he calls in the no negative zone.
His family, meaning his Justin and his daughter,
all of them.
Sydney. Okay.
Yeah, Justin and Sydney and Arnell lives with him now pretty much all the time. His older daughter. And
really? Is that Arthel? Who's his older? Arnell.
And she splits her time between Las Vegas and I think Los Angeles or some other city.
Okay.
Right. And I saw him when I was in Las Vegas last year. I checked in with him, and he's doing fine, and he doesn't want to be reminded of it. He said that he said, I can't understand why anybody would think that I want to relive the worst day of our lives. And that's kind of an understandable.
Well, but I believe he did it. So he made it the worst day of his life. That's my belief, and I believe he killed Ron and Nicole, and it was the worst day of their life.
That's one of my pet peeves, really, is that nobody believes in the justice system. He was acquitted, and anybody who is acquitted, you should, accept the jury's verdict, basically.
Well, I met a lot of those jurors, and they were ding-dongs. I'm sorry, but the dismissed ones are like, oh, because he caught a pigskin, he should, he didn't do it. And I'm like, I
think those jurors were sequestered for a year. Can you imagine being pulled out of your life and made to live in a hotel and just listen to testimony all day, every day for a year? I think they took their job very seriously. And you have to realize that it's an enormous obligation when you become a juror. The thing that bothers me is that if you are charged with a crime and you are in a high-profile case, you are a celebrity, someone like Robert Blake, someone like Michael Jackson, someone like O.J. Simpson, and you are acquitted by a jury, the public refuses to accept the verdict in all of the cases. And they say, no, we know better. We weren't there every day, but we know better.
Well, I just look at the evidence. I don't care what the jurors say. I look at all the blood, the timing, and I'm like, yeah, he did it.
No, you don't look at the evidence.
I do.
The evidence in the trial was all corrupted. And if you had sat there every day, I mean, I knew that he was going to be acquitted. And Marcia Clark knew it. She came up to my office a couple of days before the jury verdict, and she said to me, do you think we even have a chance? And I said, you have a chance if there's a hung jury. Otherwise, no.
We're talking to Linda Deutsch, Associated Press Special Correspondent, who you can follow on Twitter at Linda Deutsch. Linda, talk to us about what life is like for OJ now in terms of his celebrity.
People love him.
Yeah, people want their selfies with him. Is it something that bothers him, or is it something that he enjoys?
No, I think he enjoys it. He said to me that he's living in Las Vegas, and he said to me, this town has been really good to me. He said it's as if everyone here is apologizing to me all the time for what happened to me here, because he had an odd trial there. You have to admit, it was really strange. And he was
strange in the fact that the judge gave him the toughest sentence she could. You think it was kind of payback, if you will?
The whole thing was payback. I mean, there is a tape of the detectives examining the evidence. This is the case, in case people don't remember, in which he was accused of armed robbery and kidnapping for a hotel incident in which he tried to steal back his own memorabilia from guys who were trying to sell it. And it was there was this tape of the detectives looking at the evidence in the case and saying, well, they didn't get him in L.A., so we'll get him here. And that was kind of the feeling during that trial. And it was a lot of the evidence that was allowed in should not have been allowed in. But, he said about the whole thing, when I talked to him the other day, he said, I believe in the justice system. And I was convicted, and I served my time.
Well, I believe he got the best end of it. I think he killed those people, and I think he got away with it. So I believe
saying that, but it's not going to change anything.
Now, I know that, Linda.
I think that people should accept the fact that a jury found him not guilty.
Having said that, A jury found Leslie Van Houten, and she was acquitted, and then it was overturned, or not acquitted. Excuse me. The parole board said we want her out. You believe she should be out, so
absolutely.
Why don't you agree with what Gavin Newsom or Jerry Brown before him? Why don't you just go along with what their decision is with Leslie?
They're not a jury.
Mm-hmm. Well, the jury convicted her of death. I mean, it was overturned, but
she was not given. She was not given life without a parole. She was given life. She's been in prison for 50 years.
Well, Abigail Folger has been dead for 50 years. I mean, she was only 38. Come on. Oh, my God. She was in the prime of her life.
Yeah, fine. You could say that about any crime in the whole world, any killing, but a lot of people are out.
All right. Linda Deutsch, Associated Press Special Correspondent.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
It was a fascinating interview with OJ.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
That is something that we will always disagree on.
Yeah.
And I've been to many of those hearings. I've been to her, Patricia Krenwinkel, and I've been to, I'm having chemo brain. Who's the guy? Tex Watson, who helped kill Rosemary that night. And even though they always say, oh, she was so young, she was 19, she was the youngest, she helped stab Rosemary to death. And I will always be on the side of the victim and not the killers.
And there's an important distinction I think we need to make here. Yeah. She said you should accept the verdict of the jury. And we do, in the sense that, okay, they found him not guilty. He doesn't go to prison. That's fine.
You're talking about OJ in the case of the murders of Nicole and Ron Brown.
But that doesn't mean that we can't have opinions on what happened. Oh, we're not saying that we're going to be vigilantes and take him and throw him in a prison.
No. But
we accept the verdict of the jury in that regard.
That is correct.
We can make our own minds up based on what we've seen.
And we can disagree.
Yeah. And that's fine too.
Sure.
And there's nothing that precludes us from having an opinion.
It's interesting, though, because she has worked in crime for decades and decades and covers it and is, I think, sympathetic to the murderers and not the victims. That's just my take on Linda Deutsch.
Here is why.
Yeah.
Because the victims aren't around. And a lot of these people who are the criminals or accused criminals can be very charming people.
O.J. Simpson.
And they're the ones that are around. So those are the ones that you have contact with.
Right. Yeah.
So sometimes they can win you over. I bet you, and I've discussed this with Leo Terrell before, if O.J. Simpson were to agree to sit down for an interview with us,
we would do it.
We would do it, but I have a great fear that I would walk away from the interview liking him.
Oh, like Wendy Williams. Yeah. There's a very famous tape of her when he walked in and she's like, I'm afraid. Oh, God, it's you. And by the end of it, so I
can almost certainly tell you he would win me over.
Interesting. I tend to be, and again, I've seen these killers up close. I've seen the Manson killers up close. So I know that Linda Deutsch is used to talking to people that perhaps haven't met them and don't know enough. I know a lot about the trial. I'm very good friends with Debra Tate, and I've seen them up close. I've talked to them directly. I'm still on the side of the people that they killed. I just am.
And if you want to weigh in on the last interview we just conducted with Linda Deutsch, give us a call, 800-222-KABC.
I see we got some calls.
1-800-222-5222. Earlier this morning, we talked to Linda Deutsch, true crime reporter for the AP, and she had somewhat of a sympathetic view.
Well, she does now. To O.J. Simpson and to Leslie Van Houten. I think she's, over time, become sympathetic. I don't know that she was always that way. I don't think that was always the case. I think she just used to report on crime and not necessarily get involved. She gets involved now. I know she's been to the lunch with Leslie Van Houten. She's very much vocal about her wanting Leslie to be released. She's definitely sympathetic towards OJ.
She thinks we should accept the jury verdict.
Correct.
Let's go to David in Los Angeles. David, good morning.
Hey, David.
Good morning. I'm a trial attorney, and Linda's comments about opinions are outrageous, and I'll say three things. Number one, it doesn't take into account the quality of trial attorneys. In this case, Darden and Clark were so overrated. Clark was more interested in her hairdos. You remember certain things about, letting in the glove that doesn't fit, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Second of all, she transferred the case from Santa Monica to L.A., which was a horrible mistake.
Yeah.
Thirdly, she didn't take into account that you remember the various racial issues that were going on at that time that were in front of the jury. And finally, I just want to claim one more thing. She's so hypocritical about verdicts. She tells Julian that, well, we got to accept the verdicts, but she doesn't want to accept the verdicts in the Manson trial as to what their penalties were. And finally,
that's what I
she
said.
Made no comment about the, and finally, she made no comment about the civil verdict, although the burden of proof is different, where he got hit for millions and millions of dollars. OJ, he's got all those little factors.
Very true, David. I
good point.
Everything you said, I agree with. And she said, well, that wasn't the jury that made that decision in the Manson case. And I said, well, that's true. The jury wanted her dead. They actually voted for the death penalty, and it was overturned in 71 by the Supreme Court. So yeah, she didn't accept that. It's interesting. Very interesting, David. Thank you.
You accept it when it goes your way. And I think that's kind of the attitude that she had.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for the call, David. We appreciate it. Greg in Sherman Oaks. Greg, good morning.
Hey, guys, good morning. First of all, Jillian, you sound like $1 million. I'm glad to see you.
You should see me. I look like $1 million. I got my beanie on. I've got no eyebrows.
Excellent.
Oh, it's fabulous. But thank you, sir.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And your nipple is boobs.
I forgot. And I've got no nipples on my boobs. Thank you for the reminder, Greg. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I got a Sharpie if you want some.
This lady was driving me nuts. She, everything that Jillian was saying was right on the money, and the last caller as well. And she was poo-pooing the evidence. You said you looked at all the evidence. You followed it. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I was working weekends during that time, so I spent all my days watching the trial.
There's a blood trail.
She poo-pooed the evidence, but first of all, there was no evidence that pointed to anybody else, and all the evidence pointed directly to him.
Yeah.
So if he didn't do it, who did it?
And, still they're out there to this day, right, Greg?
Where's the hunt for the real killer? Didn't OJ say right at the end, right after the acquittal, he says, I'm going to go out and find the real killer?
Yes, he did.
Remembering that wrong.
On all the golf courses, looking for those men. Greg, if you haven't
could be in the bunker.
If you haven't seen the Made in America, OJ Made in America 5-part series, you would love it. I loved it. It's a look at his life and right up until the end. And his former manager comes out in the documentary and says, I believe he did it. It was just like, thank you for some voice of reason and sanity in all of this. A guy who knew him at the time believes that he did it. Of course he did.
Well, part of what goes on in the criminal justice system, and really the civil system as well, the quality of your attorneys frequently determines the outcome of the case.
Yeah.
And if you can go in there and you can outgun the other side, you may not necessarily have the facts on your side, but you can get the outcome you want.
Well, it works both ways. Look at the Central Park 5. Those 5 boys, and there was a 14-year-old involved, not much older than my son, convicted and this and that. And then a guy comes out and says, oops, it was actually me after what? How many years in prison did they serve? And they had DNA evidence to prove it was this guy. It works both ways. The system is not the perfect system that we want. It's not.
It totally does. And John makes another good point about the trial attorneys on the other side. Johnny Cochran and his gang, they threw everything and the kitchen sink at the jurors with the freaking plaintiff wail of the dog, and the melting ice cream on the banister. I told you, I watched this every day.
Yes, you did. I remember. I'm with you, Greg. I covered the whole dang thing. Yes, you're 100% right. It was like spaghetti. He'll see what sticks, and boy, did he do it.
Now, what do you two think about professional jurors? Do you think that would be an improvement over where we are now, or would they just bring a whole new set of problems?
That's an interesting question.
It's a great question. I've heard you bring that up before. I'm a little on the fence, but leaning towards the professional jurors, because the truth is, it's such an important aspect of
our society,
civics, that sometimes you got to have someone that actually wants to be there. I mean, how many people look forward to jury duty? There's websites about how to get out of getting to jury duty.
Yeah, it's true. And it is our civic duty, and it's a society that, you want to live in. You want to have justice, and you want things to be right. So I tend to agree with you and Greg on that. Greg, thank you for your thoughtful call, and I'm glad that you spent all those hours watching it. I did too. It's crazy.
I'm against professional jurors because they would all end up having law degrees, and those people have twisted logic.
Look at the juries that we have now. We let off Casey Anthony. She killed her daughter.
Yes.
And so
the juries that we have now are just dumb. And I'd rather deal with dumb than twisted.
They're also starstruck, especially here in LA. And Linda Deutsch can say, well, we got to accept the juries. It's a laughing stock elsewhere. When you go across the country and they say, you let Robert Blake, and she brought him up today, and OJ.
It took two times to get the Menendez brothers.
Oh my gosh. So, yeah. And they admitted it. I mean, it's craziness here.
But I think it's an LA thing.
I don't
think the juries are this crazy in Orange County or the Central Valley.
Oh, you're talking about California.
Yeah.
I agree. But it's a bit of a laughing stock that we are here.